utility scale project was at $7 a watt. Now it's around $1 a watt. Solar panels were at $3 a watt. Now they're at about 20 cents a watt. So, over that time, you've really seen the costs come down drastically. I think a lot of it had to do with Chinese getting into manufacturing. Some of these other countries jumping into solar manufacturing as well, kind of brought down the cost. So, over time, we've seen a lot of changes on the regulation side of things and on the tax side of things. Government policy really shapes our industry a lot.
Welcome to the Blue Ocean Solutions podcast, where we dive into real conversations with business owners, innovators, and industry leaders reshaping the future of clean tech, construction, and the renewable energy sector. I'm Kreel Hutchinson, your host. Today, our guest is Brad Stutzman, the founder and CEO of O3 Energy from Dallas, Texas. We'll be discussing how to ride the solar coaster, the wild swings in tax credits, capital, and policy, and still scale a profitable 13-year-old renewable energy company. Brad shares why hotels and heavy power users are rushing towards commercial solar right now, what microgrids and batteries are about to unlock, and the 2026 products O3 Energy is preparing to launch. If you're a solar developer, an EPC contractor, or commercial engine buyer, you'll love the show because Brad shows the exact how to read the renewable market in 2026. When to lean in, when to pivot, and how to spot the operators who will be standing after the next policy shakeup. It's an example of what 16 years of real industry resilience looks like in practice. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thanks for having me, Kreel.
I really appreciate you jumping on here. I love hearing our pre-podcast call and your wealth of experience around the industry. So for people who may not know you and O3, why don't you give a little bit of a background of who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for a little over 16 years. O3 Energy, it's been in business for about 13 years. I got into the industry. I had a business on the finance side of things, working with builders and developers on the real estate side, putting together the financing for their projects. In 2009 was whenever the Great Recession hit Texas, and no banks, no lenders were financing anything on the real estate side of things. So Obama came out with the American Recovery Act, had a lot of incentives for renewables in there. A lot of our developers were like, hey, can we do a wind farm on our land? Can we do a solar project on our land? There's these incentives. So learned how to put together the financing for those sorts of projects. And then eventually broke off on my own and started O3 Energy to develop our own projects. So originally we came in from the development financing side of things. We do own some solar assets, and then we've also started construction side as well. And we did residential solar for a little bit, probably about 6 years, but we ended that about 2 years ago whenever interest rates started really taking off. So that's a little bit of background.
Yeah, perfect. Brad, you've been in the industry long enough that you've seen a lot of changes, administration policies come and go. I think really just kind of also a maturing of the whole industry. From your point of view, what has changed over that timeline that you've been involved here of over 16?
Oh man, a lot has changed over the 16 years. Whenever I first got into the industry, a utility scale project was at $7 a watt. Now it's around $1 a watt. Solar panels were at $3 a watt. Now they're at about 20 cents a watt. So, over that time, you've really seen the costs come down drastically. I think a lot of it had to do with Chinese getting into manufacturing. Some of these other countries jumping into solar manufacturing as well, kind of brought down the cost. So, over time, we've seen a lot of changes on the regulation side of things and on the tax side of things. Government policy really shapes our industry a lot. And over those 16 years, we've gone through a few different administrations, a few different makeups of Congress. And so we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen the tax credit go away. We've seen it come back. We've seen the grant go away that was there, the 1603 grant, some changes in the depreciation schedule. Now we've got the residential tax credit that just went away, and the commercial tax credit is set to go away here in 2 years. But who knows? I just saw this morning that some some lawmakers just introduced a bill to bring back the tax credit for solar on the commercial side. So you never know. I mean, that's why they call it the solar coaster, like you said earlier, Krill. I mean, it's always these ups and these downs. You always got to kind of pivot with the industry and with the markets, and it's always learning new things, which is what makes the industry fun.
Absolutely. More of a personal question from you here. Like, how do you emotionally ride those out, right? Because at certain times, I would imagine you feel the squeeze on your business, like plans that you had, then all of a sudden it changes and you're not fleeing to go to another marketplace. You stayed here the whole time. So, how do you personally just deal with all of those changes on an emotional and maybe even like, physical level to keep well through it all?
I mean, it's tough. Whenever we closed our residential side of things, had to lay off about 30 people. So, times like those are tough. And then you get times wherever things are booming and everything looks great. But I feel like that's the same with any entrepreneur, right? You always have the ups and the downs. Nothing is ever just steady. If you want a steady work week, just go, work for somebody else. Don't be an entrepreneur.
100% agree with you. We've all signed up to be business owners and be entrepreneurs. So we know that the lay of the ground is not flat, right?
Yeah,
It's not consistent. It's got its challenges, which we love, right?
right.
There's where the opportunity exists. So as you look forward now, like what is the opportunity? What is the trend right now that's happening for you that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good things coming out. With the tax credit going away, there's a big push right now within the market. A lot of building owners are saying, "Oh crap, the tax credit's going away. Let me go ahead and get solar." They've been on the sidelines thinking about it and didn't really make a decision. So it's creating a sense of urgency, which is really good. We're also seeing energy prices just spike with data centers. I think Pennsylvania and New Jersey, their energy prices basically doubled this past year. I just was reading an article yesterday and it said across the US, energy prices increased, I believe it was 7% across all of the US on average. Some areas less, some areas more. So, we're seeing this big increase in electricity prices. There's a sunsetting of the tax credit. So we're seeing a big push right now for building owners to go ahead and install solar. The city of Austin just rolled out an RFP to attack 120 of their buildings with solar. They don't think they're going to get them all done before the tax credit goes away, but they want to basically safe harbor some of them. If you've got 5% of the project installed or paid for before July 4th of this year, you have an extra 2 years to do the install. So you have 4 years in total versus just the 2 years. So we're seeing a lot of groups doing that. We're rolling out some new products as well to really capitalize on the tax credit and provide some great solutions for our clients. One of which is our no-cost solar parking canopy systems for hotels. We've worked with a lot of hotels over the past few years. We were basically writing grants for the REAP grant, which was a 50% grant for solar projects. And a lot of hotels are out in the country as they qualified for USDA. So we've got a large pipeline of hotel customers, and some of them didn't qualify for the USDA or they didn't have the funds to move forward with the project. So we've put together another product to come in and offer no cost parking canopies for the hotels. And there's some details around that. If there's any hotel owners that are interested in it, we can definitely go through that. So that's one of the big products that we're excited about.
Perfect. You touched on a bunch of things. I want to follow up one thing. How should commercial buyers be thinking about the timing right now?
I mean, it's always better to move forward quicker rather than later, right? It's one of those things that, if you had solar installed 5 years ago and now you're getting into this year or last year, whenever it spiked, 7%, you're already kind of hedging your bets. Now it's a little late. You're going in and installing solar. I mean, it's never too late, but, you're not getting those savings that you could have had last year. So, the sooner the better in getting some sort of on-site generation installed.
Perfect. And then I want to follow up with the no cost parking canopy system for hotels. Tell us more about that. What brought about that idea? Obviously, you were seeing some kind of gap or pain point in the marketplace. You wanted to fill it. How have hotel owners responded? Give us a little bit of inside baseball there.
Yeah, so a lot of these hotels are in energy communities, so we get to, increase the tax credit with that. And we're also using domestic content, so we get to increase the tax credit with that. So we're really increasing that tax credit to cover a large portion of the project. So that's how we provide that solution to hotels.
Okay, great. Something you had mentioned earlier of just like a consumption happening, right? So microgrids are entering the mainstream conversation. Where do you see them fitting for heavy power users over the next 24?
Yeah, so microgrids and energy storage is becoming huge. We've got a division in Mexico, and everyone down there is wanting, all the manufacturers, all the factories, they're wanting some sort of small microgrid because they're having all sorts of rolling blackouts. The last administration in Mexico was very hostile towards solar and towards energy generation. And so they canceled a lot of contracts, made it very prohibitive to do on-site generation. And now the country's paying for it. Everyone continued to build new buildings, add new load to the grid, and energy prices have spiked down there, and they're having rolling blackouts. So, if you're a factory and you have even a glitch of a little bit of electricity for, just a few seconds, your machines are going offline. And a lot of times those machines take time to get back online. They can take as long as 24 hours to get back online. So you're losing a lot of money by not having those backup systems in place. Same thing with we're working with a group that they are an orchard, right? They do a lot with apples and they have refrigeration systems. And if those refrigeration systems go down, they're losing all of their product there. So, it's really beneficial to have some sort of backup energy source in place for whenever the grid goes down. So we're seeing a lot of push for microgrids here lately.
It's an interesting topic because you've been around for long enough that you would have seen kind of the vernacular that's being used in the industry or the marketing strategies. Probably the beginning, it was a lot about like going green and sustainability, and you just had to pay more for that. Now things have shifted, and where I'm sitting, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. It really feels like energy security is kind of maybe the new hot button, especially because we have like rising energy prices, but we also have geopolitical and military, operations and wars happening in different places, putting pressure on the system. Do you see that conversation being the new kind of like hotspot in the industry?
Absolutely. A lot of these groups, SEIA, the Solar Energy Industry Association, that's our lobby group for the solar industry. For years, their big push was global warming. And that was how they were really pushing and marketing solar. Years ago, I told them that wouldn't work in, red states. You need to focus on something else because, it's just become too polarized from a government standpoint or from a politics standpoint. And so, I was like, why don't we focus on some of these other things? Solar, you can do it from a distributed generation standpoint that helps strengthen the grid. You can provide, add batteries, you have your backup system there. You have the resilience associated with it. And, we should really push that, all those other pros as far as the product goes.
Tell the audience a little bit about like how big are you guys at O3 Energy? It seems like you got your fingers in a few pies. You obviously got some great partners you're working with. So how big is the company? Where are you guys at in where do you see yourself moving in particular this year?
Yeah. So, we're not a massive company. We're about 20 employees. Since whenever we were doing residential, we had a lot more employees, but on the commercial side of things, you can contract out a lot for each of your projects. So you don't necessarily need the staff that you do for residential. So a lot of our projects, and since we're operating on a national level as well, it may make more sense to work with a local contractor for some aspects of a project. So, we may subcontract a piece of the project here, a piece of the project there. So, from a staff standpoint, we're right around 20 employees.
How do you grow and expand your business? Like, what does your marketing and advertising look like?
Yeah, so always looking to increase revenue. Our marketing and how we reach out to the market, a lot of it is word of mouth, but we also do marketing through LinkedIn and through Google. We have 5 sales reps, and those sales reps consistently reach out to groups. So we go to a lot of conventions, especially like on the hotel side. They have a lot of hotel conventions. So we'll set up a booth, have some sales reps there, meeting with people, picking up some new leads on and showing what we can do for that hotel. I think it's one of those things that, if you have a good product, it kind of speaks for itself. It's not a whole lot of selling, right? It's more of a kind of a consulting and showing what we can offer.
So with you guys being really focused on like the commercial side of things, also on the hotel, was there another vertical that you want to bring into the conversation?
Yeah, so multifamily as well. So traditionally, we came out with a product called the solar split model. So traditionally, if someone was going to install solar on their property, they would really only be able to use it for the 1 meter, right? So if I am an apartment owner and I have all of my tenants, they pay their own electricity. It doesn't make sense for me to install solar for them because they're paying for their own electricity, right? So what we do is we have a new product now to wherever they can sub-meter those tenants based off of the solar system, and they can show the tenant exactly how much solar electricity they received from the system, and they can bill those tenants. So they can capitalize on solar for all of their tenants along with their common spaces as well. So traditionally, the multifamily property owners could only really capitalize on their common spaces. So it helps them bring in some more revenue as well. It also helps them increase the size of the system. They get a bigger tax credit. So it's beneficial across the board.
That's brilliant. So is there anyone else doing that is offering that type of service?
There's some other groups out there that are offering something similar. They've gotten hold of the similar technology, but there's not a bunch of groups out.
Okay, great. Because I haven't heard, this is the first time I've heard it, so it's great. And what has been the response back? Have you seen a peak curiosity or interest from those owners?
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen that. The other thing is, we're also looking at how we can deploy this in uses like warehouses or other types of like where people have like triple net leases, right? They're paying the electricity, but someone else owns the building. So, why would that building owner want to install solar if they're not paying for the electricity? Well, now they can. They can install the solar and then they can bill the customer the electricity or build a tenant the electricity. In the past, what they would have to do is install solar and then just increase the lease price, but you never really got a finite number as far as, okay, this is how much electricity we're using from the system. This is how much it equates for a dollar amount. It's really just kind of a guess of, okay, for the entire year, you're going to use this much electricity. So we're going to increase your lease by this amount. So it really gives an added level of detail that I think is truly beneficial for the lessor and the lessee,
Cool. Well, obviously there's a lot of good things happening in your business and in
right?
your projects. Let's flip it to what are some of the most frustrating or challenging things that you have to deal with in your day-to-day operations?
Man, probably some of the same things that we talked about, right? The changes in government policy and tax credits and things like that. Those can definitely be frustrating. This past year, it was government shutdowns. You never would have thought that would affect your business that much. But, we had a lot of USDA grants in play. And anytime the government shut down, there was nobody at the USDA office for, a month, 2 months. So, it hit us, in a couple ways. We had applications that were in that were just sitting there, not doing anything. We had customers that we did installations for, and they're saying, "Hey, when am I going to get my grant? When am I going to get my check?" Which we've submitted everything. We're just waiting on the USDA. So some of those things have been frustrating. Another area has been the tariffs. Some of the tariffs that came into play last year, since a bulk of the materials that we bring into those projects are from overseas, they're all getting hit with tariffs, and getting hit with a tariff isn't a bad thing. The difficult part was the uncertainty. One day it's this amount, the next day it's that amount. It was funny. We were sitting in with an inverter manufacturer. They're having a big event, and they said, "Hey, for this event, we're going to give I think it was like 20% off for any orders that you order during this event. That was in the morning. In the afternoon, Trump came out, and they manufacture mostly in China. And then, in the afternoon, Trump came out and said, we're hitting China with a 30% tariff. And it was like, okay, well, there goes all those discounts that everybody was talking about this morning. So, it's just the uncertainty of the change. It's not even necessarily the tax credit itself, or I'm sorry, the tariff itself. So,
Yeah, no, it's well pointed out, which it seems like all that money needs to be now given back
yeah,
to the companies. So the end consumer paid more so the companies could make more money in the end.
right. All
Kind
these,
of a strange
all
system we
these foreign
have.
companies are going to have record profits now.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, as we kind of start to look forward, you've obviously seen a lot of different shifts in the industry over 16 years and trends kind of come and go. Now we've got this new AI trend in society and humanity, right?
Right.
How does AI, what does implementation look like both in your product, maybe in product line, but also how you operate your day to day in the operations of the business?
Yeah, so we use AI for a lot of our marketing literature, a lot of our, quickly drafting emails, some processes internally, things like that. So that's where we use it. Really looking forward to how it's being implemented across the industry. We're seeing it in a few different areas, big areas in monitoring systems. There's so much data that's collected from these sites, especially larger sites, and if you're having an issue, a lot of times it takes you a lot of time to go through the data and really pinpoint what the issue is. AI is perfect for going through that data and saying, hey, this is what I think the issue is. And then you can go in and start really digging into that area of the data. So, that's a great use of AI in our industry. We also toured a solar panel manufacturer factory the other day, and they were using AI locate potential micro cracks in the panels or in the wafers that are in the panels. So, going through that manufacturing process, some things get, juggled around, may bump some stuff, things like that. And they just want to make sure that there's no issues, so it's using it more of like a quality control, and it could quickly assess the solar panel and provide some feedback if there was an issue with it. Or so, I think it's pretty exciting, some of the things that are coming down the line with in regards to AI.
Yeah, I do too. I think the industry will really benefit from it. I'm hoping that it bleeds over into the bureaucracy so that like things can just move faster with AI's help on the governmental side.
Yeah.
So, people like you don't have to be waiting around for everything for so long that things can kind of speed up there. We'll see if they get to that. They might be the slowest to adapt to AI.
Right. Yeah. I mean, permitting would be a great example if they started implementing AI on the permitting side of things. A lot of times that takes a lot of time because of the process of just the bureaucracy, right? The person that reviews it has three or four other projects in front of you on his desk he's got to review. So, if
Exactly.
if AI could attack that a lot quicker, that would be great.
As you start to look towards the future for 2026, what does success look like for you this year in regards to growth?
Yeah, so, with some of these new products that I was just telling you about, I think we're going to have a lot of success. We've already starting to see it, a lot of leads coming in regards to those. So I think we're going to have a lot of growth going forward this year, hopefully into next year and many years afterwards. So, we're looking to double our revenue this year. That's really a main focus right now for us, and I think it's definitely feasible given everything that we're working on.
Hey, so when I hear someone wants to double their revenue, I think, okay, let's say you triple the revenue. What's the first thing that breaks as you scale fast?
Well, I mean, your operations, you need to make sure that you keep up with your sales, right?
Yeah. So do you find like you've got the team in place or there are some improvements that you want to see in the operations or the sales flow? And what does that look like for your team?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always a chicken or egg thing, right? Whenever it comes to increased sales, increase operations. So, we have some stuff in the pipeline on the operations side that we're going to bring into place as we continue to bring in more projects. So I think that will help us really keep up with that load of growth.
Okay, perfect. A question I like to ask our audience and that we get feedback from them and also to our guests is if you could wave one magic wand and automate one or two aspects of your current workflow, what would they be and why?
Ooh, could automate one or two. You know what? Creating proposals would be good if AI for that. And I think they are starting to come out with some AI for drafting proposals. Sometimes those can take a little bit of time putting together a helioscope or an initial design for a customer, putting together the proposal and really getting all the numbers right. So, something like that, I think could easily be automated and would save a lot of time.
Yeah, perfect. I'm surprised that someone's not like, maybe someone already is currently working on a solar specific proposal software, right? That kind of fits what most people do and you kind of plug and play. So maybe it'll come out
I
2026 or some version of it
I think they've
can
already
figure it
got
out.
it for the residential side, but I think it's gonna be a little bit more complex for the commercial side. There's a lot more possibilities on the commercial side of things. The type of roof can be totally different across the board. If you're doing parking canopies, if you're doing a ground mount system. So, all that takes feedback, which, AI would need to jump on that. So, you may end up just doing it yourself anyways.
Yeah. Well, Brad, you've got two new products coming out in 2026. Maybe there's an opportunity for a third.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would be great. I mean, obviously, we want to focus on these, make sure that we're successful with them, don't want to bite off more than we can chew. So, really want to focus on these. But yeah, I mean, maybe next year, we'll attack a third.
Perfect. As we move towards the finish line of the conversation, I want to get your kind of high level perspective on where you think Oath Energy and the value proposition that you bring to the marketplace and where you see that, contributing and growing inside the marketplace over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, so the strengths that we have is, the focus on CNI or commercial and industrial projects. There's not a ton of groups that have experience with that. There's a lot of residential groups that now that the residential tax credit is gone are trying to get into that, but it's a totally different animal. So I think that's where our biggest strengths are. And I also think that's where, adding in the microgrids and attacking the microgrids really is beneficial the most is on the commercial real estate side of things. Residential property doesn't really need a microgrid. Utility scale, they don't really need a microgrid. It's really on the commercial side of things. And since we're already a huge provider of commercial solutions, I think that's really going to carry us into the next level going forward, attacking these microgrids.
Perfect. Well, I wish you guys at O3 Energy the very best of luck rolling this out in 2026. I want to thank you for being on the podcast, Brad. For our audience that want to continue to follow you, maybe reach out, they want to have continue the conversation. Where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so our website is energy.com, and that's the letter O, not the number zero, the letter O, number three, energy.com. Same thing with all of our social media. Instagram is at O3 Energy. Facebook's the same all across the board. So, any of those are good to reach out to us. Our phone number is also 888-999. So if somebody would just wants to call into our office.
Perfect. For our audience, I'll make sure to drop those into the show notes so you can easily find them. I want to thank you, Brad, for being on the show. To our audience, if you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it forward to someone who you may know who's ready to turn their hotel parking lot into a new vertical and adopt some of these canopy systems. Sounds like a smart investment. Any final words from you, Brad, before we leave?
No, just ready to get after it in 2026.
All right, let's do it. That wraps up another episode of Blue Ocean Solutions podcast. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks a lot, Kreel.